What's up, fellers? How you guys doing this evening? Long, long weekend. Felt like it anyway. Sick. Hey, yeah, I ended up going to grandmother's birthday yesterday. Had some fire ass steak. S- Some reason Rumble isn't starting. Hmm. Definitely have a lot to talk about this evening. What's up, Harkin? More info. Right. Yeah, I just got to put in the stream key, right? This Maybe it's because I changed my name recently, as you guys know, and for some reason it's making me put in new stream keys. It's the exact same account, just with a different name. So elocution lessons. Yeah, if I had the money, but also I this is kind of a it's a pretty informal setting for me. Informal settings, I don't talk the same at all. Like I used to sell tree work, like from door to door, I would sell it. And, I've just had no problem turning the customer service affect on. Never struggled with that. Although it has been years, there we go, fixed it. It has been years since I really had to tighten up like that. And also my vocabulary has gotten better since I started streaming, if you want to know the truth. Quite a bit actually. Like I kind of was embarrassed about how much I cursed. I'd be like, "Ooh," if I rewatch something. So I'm actually rather pleased about that. Yeah, exactly, JQ. I mean, and it's not like I don't have 50,000 followers or any such thing. You know what I mean? Like maybe those people can afford that. I can't. I don't have the money for it. Not now. I haven't worked since like I haven't done tree work since last August. I don't have a big stockpile of funds, stashed away. I wish I did. Absolutely. Anyway, yeah, it was a nice weekend. Had a decent little weekend. I seen there a lot has happened overseas, like in Europe. What's up, Stinklefink? In Europe right now, it's kind of wild. Viktor Orban just got ousted. Uh, I mean, anybody like JD Vance goes to Hungary and then Viktor Orban loses his election, and they say that JD Vance coming actually hurt him because anything associated with Trump is is it's toxic. He's toxic in a lot of different places too. I mean, it's kind of wild when you think about it. This is supposed to be our empire here, you know. And even in Japan, people are protesting us. People are protesting this war in Gaza right now in Japan. Japan is known for not being protest happy. Their people aren't constantly protesting up over there. The fact that they are protesting is kind of like not good. It just I've seen several people that are like, yeah, this isn't good. They don't ever protest, and all of us for some reason right now they're literally protesting Donald Trump. I don't think anybody saw that coming. I've never seen the Japanese protest, and in North Korea, I forget what the tweet this guy the retweet he did, but the president of North Korea just came out like or started tweeting or reposting tweets from like the Gaza genocide, and the Israelis they rebutted it and tried to, of course they tried to play it off. Oh, this was debunked, this, that, and the other. But nobody can deny the South Koreans never used to speak up about this. And the president actually said, look, I'm watching my people suffer right now. And it's my job to ameliorate that suffering, to fix whatever's wrong, and I'm going to continue to do my utmost to ameliorate this situation. I mean, it's like honestly, we have a decision to be made that we can't afford to put off much longer. I hear a lot of people saying it. We need like TYT breaking points saying they've been saying it for years. We need to decouple from Israel. But now you've got like we're getting serious pressure from around the world right now. People are not happy about this. We're going to be affected economically if this keeps going on. It's going to damage our economy. Well, those people are going to suffer. Those countries, they are going to suffer. The people, we may not suffer because of this, but there's a immense pressure building up right now for us to figure this shit out. Hey, you guys you're messing with our way of life, with this oil, these uh blockades. This is messing with our money, so to speak. We're going to make less money. Our market's, iffy about this, or, our market rises and falls. Well, it's much more serious for these other countries, much more serious. They're looking at potential, like real problems. Right now is planting season. It's spring. People can't afford to go without fertilizer right now. Like it's a catastrophe, and the longer like we're not feeling it at the moment, but that's just because supply lines, that kind of stuff takes time for you to feel the effects. We remember how COVID was. Other countries are going to experience COVID like situations. Yeah, oil is over $100 a barrel. That's insane, man. And the other countries the people are going to die because of this. The people that are just getting by right now, that have no stash of money, they're just barely getting by, or they're getting by on aid or whatever. There's going to be deaths. People are going to starve to death because of this war. Not just, our soldiers going to die, their soldiers or civilians will die, or Iran's. I mean, no, like people that have nothing to do with the conflict are going to starve because of this. And and we're already feeling financial pressure, but because other countries, people are going to go without. And like South Korea, Japan, they're high tech just like us. They all have phones. That's what they're as hooked on it as we are, and they're fixing to have to go without oil and stuff. Like maybe they'll have to do rolling brownouts or something. Who knows? But this is absolutely affecting our best allies, our allies and our partners that have been a part of our empire and strategically essential for our empire. Japan is one, South Korea, they produce so much technology. A lot of partners all over the world are really, really not happy with us. Like they are pissed. And we're gonna have to make a decision. They're pissed at us for starting this, but they're really pissed off at Israel. Like they are. People have had enough of this group. This group of oppressive colonists. Basically, they are colonists. And the quicker that we jettison this albatross that's around our neck, the better off we'll be. We'll still get some of the blame for what's going on now, or the fallout from this war, but we're getting blamed for complicity in the Gaza genocide. Basically, we stood by and let it happen, but we're not the genociders. We haven't done anything like that yet. If we can still walk away from this with our reputation, if we just cut these bastards loose. I mean, I think honestly, the Israelis, I think that there's a self-selection bias there. The people that live there, the people that run that country, it's only the most radical. Yeah, absolutely. Philippines, that was a part of our, it was literally the same as Puerto Rico for a while. We gave them their independence in like 52, but we occupied that since like the Spanish American War. Huge partners. Germany, same thing, and these aren't just like vassal states. Germany, they build power plants. Like they started some of Iran's power plants, like built them, nuclear power plants. So Germany, that's not just like Germany, Japan, South Korea, these are major players. They're not as big politically or even populace wise, but they produce great stuff for us. They make it easier on us to administer the world, more or less. And they're our partners in administering our own empire. There's a reason why the Germans helped the Iranians build nuclear power plants and not us. You know, Germans have their own engineering and intellectual prowess, physical when it comes to this stuff. And a lot of these countries have prowess that like rivals Russia, because the Germans built those power plants or built one for Iran, at least one, and left Iran, but just as soon as they finished, and the Russians had to come in and then retrofit everything from the German design to their design. But like that's like parity. That means that the Germans have parity with the Russians when it comes to nuclear power plants and shit. Like, these are major allies of ours. We can't really afford to not have them. And I seen a meeting that took place over the weekend with Putin, where he was sat down with many leaders, and basically he was saying, look, we're trying to offer some help, some guidance, anything that we can offer that will stop this conflict, and that will help. We're not pushing anything on, these are his exact words were, we're not pushing anything on anyone, we're just offering potential solutions. But even Putin, when he talks about America, Russia, when he talks about political terms, he talks about them in the same terms that I do. When he talks about this war with Iran, he talks about the ruling elite in America waging this war. When he talks about or political or political situations around the world, was he was straight up referring to that to us, America, as American political elites because it's their empire. It's not our empire. You know, they decide when we go to war. They decide what happens when we cut a deal with a country or they're the ones that make these decisions. And it really just reinforces some of the things that I've realized over the last year that, it's an organized minority and a disorganized mass. It's, you're either one or the other. You're either in the elites or you're in the masses. So much so to where Putin himself talks in those terms because we don't, when do we declare war on anybody? We haven't declared war on Iran, as in the people. I never declared war, and I was never consulted you know, unless you uh, are including the election. And they asked me, and I said, no, no more new wars. Yet they obviously have their own reputations and own futures wrapped up in it. But the way that I see leaders of great countries, the way that they talk about things, I know I'm right over the target. That's exactly how things are. When they talk about us bombing Iran, it's the American political elites. They know, like, and he said, we were in good stead with America until 2014, the Crimean situation. But he said, and then it was necessary for them, for the American ruling elites, to turn us into a scapegoat or a fear or a threat. Because he even said, he goes, the American ruling elite have, since World War II, been able to use, just like any other country, any other government, they use threats from abroad to justify political mistakes or uh, uh, political mistakes or justify pissing our money away, spending it like Trump saying 1.5 trillion, upping it by 500 billion. They justify it by talking up threats. And these threats may or may not exist. And since World War II, they have used Russia as a stalking horse or a Trojan horse to piss our money away. They have literally ignored huge problems in America. They've ignored or to avoid dealing with them, to avoid acknowledging problems. There's like a new shiny object every time. They always have some way to justify pissing more money down the drain, not investing in infrastructure or anything for us. And Putin was saying this, and I don't listen to anybody, and I've said this before. I really don't. I don't place faith in anyone. I don't stake my reputation on what anybody else says. It's just another any evidence that I get from testimony from anyone. It's just data. It's just data. I'm not willing to place my reputation on someone else's opinion. Now, however, I will place my own reputation on my own opinion. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. But seeing that meeting with Putin, I was just thinking to myself like, man, I'm definitely over the target with the way I see things because even the people that are in the know on planet Earth say it the way I say it. So I mean, the only people that don't say it the way that I say it are our ruling elites. And they absolutely have incentive not to talk to be honest about it. And honestly, I'm to the point now where actually what our government and what our media says has the least amount of purchase for me. What's up, Arceus? Yeah, we definitely did allow it to happen in Gaza, and we really didn't have a choice, but, it's still a stain on our flag. We can redeem ourselves, we've done shitty stuff before, but people know that that's blood is on our elite's hands. It's on Trump's hands. We just can't we can't continue voting for this. And that's the deal is and I don't think we will continue voting for this. People are tired of it. Mm. I was reading some studies, and one I saw from Britain was really interesting. Children, Violence, and Vulnerability by the Youth Endowment Fund in 2024 in England, using 10,000 teenage children ages 13 to 17 in England. Of the boys and girls out of that 10,000 that had been in a relationship, those that experienced at least one violent or controlling uh, behavior from a partner, 57% of the boys said they had experienced that versus 41% of the girls had experienced at least one time violent or controlling behavior. 57 versus 41%, 41% being the girls. Physical and controlling behaviors, such as partner went through phones or social media, 37% of boys versus 23% of girls. Afraid to break up, afraid of has a fear or fears breaking up. 31%, 37%, or no, it's 31% for the boys, 20% for the girls. Sexual coercion, 25% of the boys versus 15% of the girls. Hit, kicked, shoved, 27% of the boys versus 12% of the girls. That's that's such an indictment over our culture. I mean, that just those numbers, that would have been absolute those numbers would have been unheard of 30 or 40 years ago. They would have or even prior to the 60s, I doubt there would be even 1% of men would ever have experienced that. But all of a sudden, women are beaten up and I mean, it blows my mind that boys have absolutely you can tell that these are good people and they want to do the right thing. They've been what's up, JQ? They've been educated, they've been, told what is right and what is wrong, and they prefer to abide by it. Whereas the girls, it's almost as if they have just like a blatant disregard for their boyfriend or the person they're in a relationship with. Seriously, 57% of boys had had experienced violence or controlling behavior versus 41% of the girls. I mean, that's crazy that the boys are reporting that these girls are out of control, and we all know they are. That's just numbers that prove it. We all know they are. Women, they're just belligerent. They without even thinking, they will swing, they will provoke, and it's gotten to the point like, and nobody's happy. They're not getting what it's like. It's not like it gets them what they want. It doesn't. And the hubris. It's so funny or weird to me that that's like a very masculine, historically a uh, masculine type of way of describing someone. Hubris. Typically, men are the hubristic gender. Not anymore. Not anymore. And like the chauvinistic gender, it's not men. You don't see men taking stuff for granted. You know, you do see women doing that. But I've been just seeing of a furore, if you will, about the fact that feminism has failed, it's dying, or it's dead. Really, it's dead. And that now people are just starting to look at the data to pick up the pieces, and everybody's like downright appalled. And I seen a contrast. I was going to use this as a thumbnail, but a picture of a woman from the 60s with a picket sign that says, all we want is equal pay for equal work. And then side by side, there is itty bitty titties in a bob. Itty bitty titties in a bob. That stupid fucking group of women in that office. And it's like, whatever happened to we just want fair? Whatever happened to that? You went from we just want equal pay to, yeah, we own everything and ha ha, you fucking losers. Like, really? Like, all of a sudden, it's in your face, belligerent. And what's crazy is I seen another thing. This guy wrote a book. He went into the historical record as far back as we have records, like Sumeria and shit, to see what women's rights had, the effects that it had on civilizations. And I think there was somewhere around 80 civilizations that had done it. All of them perished because they're shortly after. Because what happens, what actually happens is men, they want women to be able to walk the streets without their husband and be safe. They want women to be able, they want the equality. Men are very generous and they want their women to be able to take care of themselves if they need to. But to for that to happen, they must build the infrastructure to allow it to happen. You have to have a police force, you have to have civilization and civilized people. And so those men, they have to build that. They have to build up a structure or infrastructure more or less to create a place or a space where women, are safe and where they can seek redress for, crimes committed upon them. So the men, they create a government or a state that provides that. And then what the women do is they realize what the men have done, and then they take over that state or that structure, and then they leverage that structure to oppress men. Every time they do this, men work up to put this structure in place that will check men that step out of line. Once they do that, the women realize that they can use that structure to hurt the men or to steal from the men. So they end up that they do that. Then the men, the society, it basically implodes, whether the men change things or not. Like they've all been destined for the garbage heap of history. And when I heard it put this way, I was like, wow, it never I knew that I've been trying to figure out how to explain it succinctly or how to visualize it mentally. But when the guy put it that way, the men, they have to build this structure that allows women to be equal. So they build this structure, and then the women, in short order, take that structure and use it to oppress the same men who built it. I mean, come on, talk about biting the hand that feeds you. What are you talking about? I can't read his fucking name because Jonathan Silva. Does it really matter if he's a Fed? Who gives a shit, really? I mean, honestly. But the fact that historians, and I need to find what this book is called because the guy went all the way back to Sumeria. I mean, I guess there's is an exact number of civilizations that have done the equality thing, and they've all perished, you know, which is crazy. The only ones that haven't perished are the ones that didn't do it or haven't got to that point yet. And what's crazy is, it's a global world and it's trending towards kind of even in other countries they're trending towards where we are. And if you let women, if you give them equality, they'll punish you for it apparently. So it's kind of a fool's errand. It's a folly to do this, who know and I don't think there's no example of a society that really recovered from this. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. But it's like and what's crazy about it's just been like the last 16, 17 years since like 2010, 2008, I guess. But it was still reasonable prior to 2008. Like that statistic I use all the time of the writing rooms of Hollywood that went from 54% male to 11% male. And that happened in all kinds of industries, which is wild. But it's obviously it's no good. AI is fixing to take tons of these white collar jobs. I think it's going to be moot. It's going to be a moot point anyways. But I don't think we can fix it unless a lot of people just get out of the way. Like a lot of, there's Hollywood. It's still crumbling. And really the problem is to virtue signal. They placed the people that benefited from DEI, talentless women, white women, talentless white women, colored people. They're put into these positions. And I'll tell you the reason why Hollywood won't let it go because they put those people in the positions. They're in the position to where they would have to fire themselves. So it's almost like we can't we can't expect Hollywood to fix itself because it would literally require the people who got their jobs through DEI to say DEI is no good. They're not the ones that are spending the money. The people that are spending the money, they're just not investing the money anymore. They're like, fuck it, I'm not, movies are no good. Because you can't get a movie made without unions or everybody has their hand out. And then you're dealing with virtue signaling progressives. And it's like every time they come out with one of these movies where they totally destroy beloved IP, Star Wars, destroyed like truly beloved IP, Star Wars, Toy Story. They destroy it. And then when people do the inevitable backlash comes, They want to tell the audience they're wrong and they're just bigots. It's like, no, they're right. And you have no, like, think of this, a business owner, who the fuck, how do they have the gall to tell people that they're wrong? That's not what you want. Because whether they like it or not, Hollywood has one goal. One job is to entertain people. Comedians have one goal, to make people laugh. If you're going to, like Stephen Colbert, if you're going to become political, your one job is to make people laugh, and you're committed to not making people laugh, then what good are you? What business have you being on camera if you're not going to do what your fucking job is? You're not going to make people laugh. You're going to lecture people. It's ridiculous. In Hollywood, I'm not sure that because they in 2000, it was such a radical problem with that Me Too, and especially during COVID, they put these people in positions so high up, and they're not willing to admit they were wrong, because if they admit they were wrong, they would admit that they shouldn't have the positions they have, and they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They've kind of fucked themselves. Hollywood has. They're not able to just easily abandon that techno or that ideology and start investing in, because they could go back to a pre 2008 model where they, like the Tom Cruise model, celebrities, where they don't let celebrities talk in public. They only talk at premieres, like Tom Cruise. He never talks, and that makes him a celebrity. These modern celebrities, they talk so much, nobody cares. But they could go back to a model where they made real movies that entertain people. Instead, they want to make these shitty. They want to keep doubling down, as if they just turn up the indoctrination higher, somehow they'll convince us to like crap. Like, it's crazy. They think that if they just turn up the DEI harder, if they did, remember that Ghostbusters, the women Ghostbusters? Like, what were they thinking? They do that and then people backlash. So they do female Supermans, and female this, female that. People just keep fucking it. It's to the point where people don't even care anymore. They don't even complain anymore. When people complain, that isn't so bad. People are still talking about it. They still care. When people don't even talk about stuff anymore, that means they're indifferent. They don't even give a shit anymore. That's where we're at. And it's such a shame. Such a tragedy. And it's like that with music. It's like that with everything, art, culturally and artistically. And also, I think there's almost the majority of liberal arts degrees are received by women. And what's funny is all these female superheroes, all of these strong female roles, they're literally all the things that people said were wrong about male chauvinistic roles, about the men that everybody talks shit about. They just made them women. They made them chauvinistic. They made them, uh, women are perfect. Women are this and that. All the things that they, all of the criticisms that they levied against men in Hollywood, men in the culture, they do the same thing except with women. And that's what I mean is, it went from men being chauvinistic, men being having hubris, not, being kind of unaware when they hurt people's feelings, or when, that some people didn't like, that kind of behavior, that kind of way of carrying yourself. Well, we woke up and said, well, that is kind of distasteful. Maybe we shouldn't do that anymore. And we've corrected a lot of those things. Well, now the women, it's gone from them just wanting, and I remember my dad, as I was in a car seat, and I remember hearing my dad, or me asking him, or why do women want to fight in wars? Or, because I remember hearing it on the radio, and he's like, well, It seems to me he said, "It seems to me like they want it more than equal." You know, they keep talking about equality, but it's not about equality, it's more than equal. And we all know that to be the truth. That's what they're doing at the moment. Yeah, well, narcissism pretty much. And you guys know what I'm talking about, the chauvinism and stuff. Like this isn't just me making shit up. Like that, what was it, Captain Marvel? It was ridiculous. That girl that played Snow White, you remember how chauvin she was like, "Oh, what a stalker." You know, Prince Charming is a stalker in Snow White. You know, it's just this really overconfident, and it's distasteful. It's just gross. And it's gross when men do it, it's gross when women do it equally. They're both gross. Yes, and we're not getting any of the modest feminine roles that we used to get and that you would admire about women. You know, the traits of women that were admirable. Those don't like their picture of a great woman or of a empowered woman is literally just a dickhead man. Like straight up. It's just a bitch. Whereas the man would be an asshole. And, like, it just shows that's how much how delusional these people are. Like, the stuff that they used to rail about and say was gross in men, really, they actually admired those men, and they wanted women to be more like that, but it doesn't work. Boss babe shit. It's a meme. It's a meme, and nobody wants to be seen contributing to that stuff anymore. It's all just been, like, one big nightmare, I feel like. Like, and it's been my entire adult life. Since I was 18, I've just been kicked around more and more as time goes. That's what it's felt like, men, you know, just being kicked. All men being tarred with like this Me Too brush. Like there's this that asshole Harvey Weinstein. And maybe he isn't as guilty as they made him out to be. Maybe he's not they made him out to be a monster, which I didn't think was right. But they've proven to be no better. Matter of fact, they've proven it to be worse. They don't even produce you know, like at least those men actually had they produced something of value, and that's why nobody said anything for so long because they made money for people. You know, they gave jobs. People were beholden to them. They made their investors money. Harvey Weinstein. They actually had talent or skill, something to offer everybody. They benefited society in other ways. So people look the other way. These women, they don't benefit society in any way. They just damage and destroy. And I think everybody's had enough of it. But you know, the sad thing is though, is they've destroyed so much. People have had enough of it, but they don't know if this is worthwhile investing in this society anymore. People are reluctant. They don't know where it's going to go. Well, geez, we've seen what's happened in the last 15 years. Why should I fight for this? Or why should I, you know, build anything? Why should I work hard and invest my life into society when society's breaking down or I'm the villain of that society? And they're they're doing it only out of necessity more or less or out of uh uh biological prudence. You know, this is prudence. This isn't just meant acting beyond or on a whim. And like what was, you know, men falling behind in the liberal arts degrees that was like used to slant, you know, they wrote so many articles, these feminists, basically saying, oh, men, they're adrift, men are, you know, rudderless, men are struggling, there's a loneliness epidemic, which is horseshit. They were just taking statistics and then weaving spiderweb stories to slander men and to make it seem like they were so much better. When really, no, men just realized social like liberal arts degrees, that's literally progressive indoctrination. There you have Gavin Newsom's wife talking about forcing dolls on boys, basically trying to emasculate boys and trying to impose their will on those boys and impose ideology malevolently, you know, even though the kids don't want it. And I've seen articles too about women looking for advice on how to get their like 12-year-olds that are resisting the indoctrination and their moms coming on the internet looking for help. How do I rebut his rebuttals? Because my 12-year-old, won't he won't drink the Kool-Aid. And it's so unnatural. And the fact that men, not through being in cahoots, not from colluding, men have stepped back. And nobody can argue this. Men aren't participating anymore. And it's not because they're all in a club where they're talking to each other. No, it's instinctual. So women have triggered instincts. The fact that it's men in all strata of society across the globe in unison are reacting in the same way. Not because they're being told to, not because they're in cahoots with each other, but because deep down they feel some type of way. They feel that it's not a good idea, that it's not in their best interest to participate. Women, they have triggered a biological response from 50% of the population, the opposite sex. And they've gone so far that they've triggered a biological response. That's incredible. It's damning. It's a damning indictment of this ideology. Well, I really don't mean to, and I try to say that stress this as often as I can. That it's really like 20%. I feel like, and I think there's a lot of it has to do with the guys that go along with this too, because there's always that group of this kind of sneaky, gross men that think that this is a way for them to get women, or maybe it's just they do really do agree with them, but it's not all women. It's not even most women. It's like 20%. And like I try to stress this as much as I can. I love women, and I've only known a few women that came off as though they were that 20%. And women fought this themselves, because this really isn't women in general. No, this is an ideology that it just was able to infect women, to or certain women, and infect our culture, because women did fight this. Women protested against this stuff. The majority of women did not agree with this ultra extreme feminism. And like I've seen footage from the 60s where they like man on the street footage asking people, where the women were actually more intuitive, actually understood what these people, this ideology was attempting to do. Like by the way that they reacted. You could see that men instinctively knew that this wasn't good ideology. It wasn't conducive to happiness. It wasn't conducive to happy families and happy society. But the women, there was something about the way they answered. Like there was this woman, probably in her 40s, really smart. She was obviously a very intuitive woman. It was in England, and they asked the woman. They said, how do you feel uh, about women in the workforce, or how would you feel about men staying home to take care of the children? And this woman, she's like, that's awful. No, that's not a good idea." And they're like, "Well, why do you feel that way?" She goes, um, or, what like, what's the problem? She goes, "Well, it wouldn't be good for my husband's ego." And that woman instinctively knows, like, it's a good thing for men to have a family to provide for. Gives the man purpose and direction, and this woman, she knew that that's something that he needs, and just the way she answered, that it wouldn't be good for my husband's ego if I made as much money as him or if he was at home watching the kids when I went to work. And now there's nothing wrong with a woman doing that if they wanted to go for it. I'm not here to tell anybody how to live. But the fact that this woman, you know, she was concerned about her husband's well-being, his well-being. And this is like, I think this was the exact same uh video where they were asking men, what do you think your highest or your job is in the house? And he said, well, to take care of my wife, provide for my family, make sure that my wife has everything that she needs to take care of the family, the household. That's my job. And then, they asked the women and they said, well, you know, my job is to take care of the children, educate the children, make sure that, they have clothes, they have nice or not clothes, ratty clothes on, make sure that they have what they need. But nobody said to make sure that I'm happy. Nobody said their number one job was to take care of themselves. No, it was always their job was to look after others, the people that were lower on the totem pole, perhaps than they were. And those people back then, you can't. Those were smart people and intuitive people that even though they may not have been able to put things into words, they instinctively knew something was up. When they're talking about women making, going out and earning more while the man stays at home. And most of these women are like, I work part-time, except when I've had it, when the kids are small. And then when the kids grow up, I would imagine I'm going to go back to part-time. And nobody was talking about things like that. They were kind of talking about full-time work, but so very, very moderate, a very middle of the road. Uh, and that was reasonable too. And everybody, that's how this stuff got its foot in the door. And those people back then, they put them on alert when people started talking about this. And there's even huge movements of women, of mothers, homemakers, wives that were standing up against these feminists that were trying to get women out of and saying that women should be working, that women should be out doing what men do. There was a huge movement of women that counter protested this stuff. And that's, I bring that up because there's always been the majority of women that didn't go along with this stuff, that were not mesmerized by trinketry, or these were people that had a lot to lose. People with family, they didn't want they were already very happy. They had families, they had loving husbands, they had great children. So of course, they don't want to see that kind of change. They had already bought into the sort of more or less the natural order, or they had already decided, no, I'd rather have children and a family, the husbands and the wives. So when you start talking about women going to work and they didn't want anything to do with it. This is also after, long after these women could vote. Uh, it was more or less I guess the second or third wave feminism that was trying to push women into the workforce. And what's crazy, like I said, those women, they were thinking about their husband's well-being, their children's well-being. Like those are really admirable people. Like the idea of themselves never even came up in these interviews and these question, in these answers and stuff. Like those are the kind of people that, you know, I want to know. Those are the kind of people that I want to be surrounded with. Uh Reliable, competent, responsible people that don't shirk their obligations, that rise to them. And those are the people that are under attack from these ideologies. So, and I said all that, to emphasize that no, it isn't all women, and it's not even women. And I try not to blame women. A lot of time I've said this before. It's just an ideology, and it's not women. Like really, the way I look at things is we're all kind of just one half of a whole. And society, our civilization used to look at it that way too. You really weren't a whole person unless you were married. That's when the ice cream dish, the side of the screen. Oh, that's funny. It is an ice cream dish. It's a tip jar, I guess. But I actually brought it up because my mom used to put dessert in these cups when I was a kid, and I haven't seen these cups. It just recently occurred to me that those are Sunday cups from like soda fountains or drugstores. But I've never really, that's dead and gone, that kind of culture. But I just thought it was weird. There's only like three choices for the jars you can use. You can use a cut glass, a mug for that, and one of them was a Sunday dish. Yeah, exactly. It's a Sunday dish. My mom used to make pudding in those and stuff. It was just kind of weird. And when I saw that, I was like, what the hell? It's just sort of odd. But yeah, it's the tip jar. Yeah, Friendlies. Oh man, I remember Friendlies. It's a shame that we don't have that kind of pop culture anymore that we used to have. The soda fountains, uh, and that's like the burger joint. Like, really, you got to go to Route 66 or California to find those burger stands. You know what I mean? That's where you really have to go if you want to. Like, I remember when I went to Arizona to visit my grandparents, we stopped at those A&W, the A&W restaurants. I've seen them in Florida before, only one time though, and I never really went there. But you can get the root beer floats. They have the on tap root beer and cream soda. It's just awesome. And there are tons of those establishments, but they're out west. Like, what the hell? That used to be like peak Americana. Like truly peak Americana. The best part of American culture. Truly. And like the font of culture for the world. We've totally lost that. And if you guys ever wonder what the hell I'm doing this for, it's for that. Like that stuff, all of these dying, all these things that we used to own. Like, Americans were when people thought of Americans, they thought of Coca-Cola, blue jeans, leather jackets, bikers, motorcycles. Like they thought of Harleys. There we once contributed so much to the world. Like Japan, China. I don't know if you guys have ever seen any Jackie Chan movies from the 80s, like Rumble in the Bronx, stuff like that. Uh, where everybody's got leather jackets on. It's like they were going through like what we went through in the 50s with greasers and stuff. That was It's almost like China is always like 30 or 40 years behind America. And in like those 80s Jackie Chan movies, you'd see it sometimes where they have like a pair of Wayfarers on, pair of Ray-Bans with their leather jacket and their blue jeans. But that was That's like peak Americana, and we've lost that. Like, I was watching Good Morning Vietnam over the weekend, and they did a montage of the troops in Vietnam, and they're all just these, just white guys or black guys that are just easygoing, carefree, free and easy, fun and fancy free, if you will. They got their shirts off, blondes, guy light hair, just white guys out there just laughing or enjoy dancing, enjoying the music, smoking a cig, and they're all working machinery, whether it be a 50 cal or a helicopter. And I feel like when people talk about, man, whatever, like nobody knows how to jumpstart a car, or men, they don't know how to do anything anymore, or what happened to men. Well, we were basically, especially after 2008, we haven't been given anything of responsibility. All of the generations that came before us at 18 or 19, and especially in the 60s, your ass was getting drafted unless you were a rich silver spoon kid. Your ass was getting drafted, and you were getting stuck behind some expensive piece of military equipment, whether that be operating an artillery gun, a piece of artillery, operating, a PT boat, helicopter, a jet, in charge of a platoon, other men's lives. You had responsibility, huge life and death over the men below you, the men around you. If you fucked up, they die. We haven't had that in a long time. Yeah, it did used to be a treat. Or going up to the baseball park and watching Little League. They had little concession stands, Bad News Bears. God, that was like, and at some point after 2008, because I remember before 2008, everybody's family was kid oriented. Everybody. You know, when a family had kids, it was only like 20 years later that those kids would have kids. So there's only like a few and if a family has more than one kid, if they have 3 kids, they still have children in the house when the oldest a lot of times when the oldest is having children. So families would be like kid centric, for generations. I know my family was, my dad's side and my mom's side, both sides. I just got a photo album that my dad's two youngest twin sisters, they're into scrapbooking, and they do that for all of me and my cousins. They take all of our pictures from our childhood and they make a scrapbook, a thick ass scrapbook out of it. And I was just looking through mine, and God, man, it was like there was always a little kid in the scene, a small child. If it wasn't me, it was somebody else's kids. My dad, he has 6 sisters, so all, his sister's kids are his youngest sister's kids are just having started or just have started their families in the last few years. And it doesn't seem like we have that anymore. And it's like, what a loss, man. It's such a loss. It really is. I like now I do have a lot of cousins that have kids because they're women, most of them. Well, they all do, but there just doesn't seem to be as much of a focus on children in our society. When I was a kid, it was all about kids. And women, like when men graduated high school or college, all they were thinking about was going out and leaving their mark on the world, or finding their way, making their fortune, making good. And women, it was like when they completed that stuff, they either had their guy already picked out at the end of high school or college, or they knuckled down to get that taken care of. Like children that was the number one goal. My dad's two youngest sisters both graduated from college. It was like right there within a few years. They both met somebody in college, and they both started having kids there shortly after. And both of them, my aunt, one of my aunts, was making over 6 figures one year, and she's like a stay-at-home mom. She was just able to do that part-time. But, like, women aren't being, uh, directed towards having children like they used to. Like, that was a priority, and then, like, you'd focus on your career when you'd focus on work when you could. You just wanted to get those, get your children. But it doesn't seem to be that way, almost at all. You know, that's like at least when I was turned 18, the girls that I was surrounded with, that wasn't in their mind at all. And it's such a shame. I mean, I hope we can get back to that. It hasn't been as long as it seems. Seems like it's been decades, but it's really only been like 10 years maybe that it's been in kind of we've we've been in full whatever you would call this era. But it seems to be over. But I feel like we have like this lack of leaders, or this I don't know, we have a deficit of leaders. We don't have the leaders we used to. We don't have People just aren't stepping up like they used to. It's like there's like this almost like a planned helplessness. Like they have deliberately convinced Americans that they're helpless. That we can't do for ourselves. We don't know anything, like we can't come up with stuff that people will want. We don't we wouldn't we're not able to create products that people want, come up with ideas that people good ideas. I feel like we've been kind of convinced of this. Like, people are afraid to even work on their own car. It's like, I remember when my little brother, he didn't think he could work on cars, and it's like he's always relying on me or my older brother to come bail him out. And then finally he realized that he needed to get serious and learn how to take care of himself, or how to figure stuff out for himself. It was literally an attitude adjustment. And now his friends rely on him. They call him. There's radiator hoses uh in his garbage right now from his friend needing him to replace radiator hoses. And his friend's like, "How do you know all this? How do you do that? How do you know all this? How do you know how to fix it?" It's not that he knows how to do everything. He just has the confidence in his own ability, and the willingness, the inclination to sort it out, to solve the problem. Whether he knows the problem or not, he's going to get to the bottom of it. And there's a severe deficit in that manner. I mean, my brother's a smart kid, but he had to learn this. I don't think people had to learn it really back in the day. I feel like our education system, provided people with this. They had shop class, a mechanic class. But now it's like, shoot, we don't have home economics anymore. Uh, no, nobody thinks they know how to do anything, or that they can do anything for themselves. But I'll tell you who doesn't feel that way. The Jays don't feel that way. When they have an idea, they're told, "Here, you need investors," and they get pushed up. They start stuff. They start new businesses. They come up with ideas, and then they practice them. All these different AI companies that have these guys at the head of them. Mark Zuckerberg starts Facebook, or he basically steals it from somebody else. And that almost, I believe that's probably why MySpace, they didn't allow that to catch, because it was done by one of us. It was done by one of us, one of the cattle, and they couldn't have that. We can't have one. We can't have a rival advertising app, because that's all these are. These are targeted advertisement apps. Facebook, Twitch, it's nothing but an app that figures out how to advertise to you, figures out because really these aren't social media apps, these aren't video apps, these are advertising apps that use videos as bait. And honestly, it like when I heard somebody put it that way, I was like, God damn it. You're absolutely right. Like Facebook, that was the greatest ruse ever done. Oh my God, it really tricked us. Like thinking that that was an app that was good for us or that was useful. No, it was an app that was useful for Google, an app that's useful for people that want to mine us. But I said this the other day with the Jays. I came up with this really good analogy. Vines, they're vines. I know tree work and trees. And that's what vines are. Trees, they take decades to build up the trunk and the height to reach the tops of forests, to reach the canopy, where the sun is, where the energy is. It takes them years of weathering and enduring hurricanes and tornadoes and ice and fires. And they finally get up to the top. And then some piece of shit parasitic vine out of nowhere starts growing. And instead of it having to build up its resistance to wind and stuff, it uses the other people who have contributed and who have built and worked and invested. It climbs on their back, and then it grows to the top of the canopy like that, and then it spreads over the top of the canopy and strangles those trees out. It kills those trees eventually. And it does it, it's long and it's miserable and brutal to the trees that it strangles. It really is. And that's the perfect analogy. That is the perfect analogy of what these people do. You know something? After a while, absurd things like there's a cabal of Jays that run the world secretly. That stuff is absurd until you've seen so much that what you've been propagandized to believe is insane and untrue. That's you start accepting that there's a possibility it could be true, and you end by believing it's true, or not necessarily believing it's true, but accepting there's an overwhelming obviousness or an overwhelming odds that that's the truth. There's like their women are known for being kind of loose. Like I said this the other day with remember in Goodfellas, Tommy, he keeps trying to talk his buddy into going on a double date with him with two Jew broads. I'm trying to fucking bang this bitch here. You gonna help me out or what, man? What the fuck, Henry? Like he's trying to bang this broad. Well, I think that's by design. I think their women are encouraged to marry into a culture so that they can get their hooks into that culture, kind of like a Trojan horse. They're flat out trying to get into power, and they go and what I was saying was imagine how many languages they have spoken over the thousands of years. All the different languages. They've spoke Yiddish, German, uh imagine all the different Middle Eastern ones. My family, at both sides of my family, has spoken English for period. Neither no other language. No other language, just straight up English for the last 1,000 years, or basically as far back as you want to go since England was a thing, my family's always spoke English. And probably your families have only spoken one or two languages. Most likely, they've spoken whatever that whoever's the most powerful nation on the planet, they learn their language and infiltrate those civilizations. At one point, the Jays, they did was wander around Europe and Russia. And then we blow up and become a superpower. The first thing they did, as soon as that war was over, the war that we had won and basically proved our dominance, the first thing they did was immigrate to America and set up shop here and get us, and they've been using us as their host since World War II. And I think their women are considered I think that's by design. And that's why it's matrilineal. That's why the only way to really actually inherit Judaism, your mom has to be Jewish. That's why it's matrilineal. That's why their women are that way. And they'll learn whatever language they have to. They'll buy, they will breed with any group they have to. Whoever has the power, that's where they go because they can't get the power on their own. They don't want to get the power on their own. They want to leverage somebody else's hard work. They want to use what other people have built, the institutions, the civilization other people have built, they use to, to parasitize other people. They and that's all they do. And that's why they've been thrown out of so many countries. That's why people, I really don't care one way or another as long as those people leave me the fuck alone. You know what I mean? Like as if they weren't in America and they didn't have their lobby, we wouldn't give a shit. But when they have you targeted for their host, it's a problem. And we're not the first ones to discover this problem. And honestly, and the ones that are left, they're the radical holdouts because they're, over the centuries, over the millennia, they have so many of them converted. They just converted, said, yeah, fuck them dudes. And they end up just joining us. They did it in Spain with the Reconquista and the Spanish Inquisition. They've done it all over the place. Lots of them. Lots of the Palestinians have Jewish ancestry. They were once Jews, but now they've converted to either Muslim or Christianity. But these ones, these are the extremists. These are the holdouts. These are the ones that refuse. They refuse to accept their humanness, that they're just like everybody else. And I seen this woman, I guess she went to Israel in 2016, and she was asking them on the street, what's going on with this is in 2016. How do you feel? First of all, she said as soon as she would ask them, they'd be like, "What are you?" They would force her to announce are you Arab? Because she was blonde too, or no, she had brown hair in that when she was blonde in the uh in most of the video, but the stuff where she was in Israel, Tel Aviv, was she had brown hair. They made her admit, are you Arab or are you what? She's like, well, I'm American. Then they would talk freely with her. And they're like, oh, one girl was like laughing while she said we should drop a bomb on all of them, all the Arabs. And the woman made a good point. She's like, the fact that they felt that I would agree with them, they were so open about these truly despicable opinions they held because they thought, oh, she's American. She agrees with us. Muslims and Arabs, they're filth. They're beneath us. We should just drop a nuke on them. Well, and like I was saying about the kid who spit on Brandon Tatum, that kid thought it was okay to do that. Well, a lot of these people, they think it's okay for them to do that. And it's okay. And the woman basically ended by saying, this is a straight up ethno state, and she called them fascists because she doesn't know what a fascist is. It finally it occurred to me recently that what the left calls fascist, they're just talking about an openly uh, chauvinistic society that is ethnocentric. It's a mono uh, uh, it's an ethno state, you know, and they to them a country that people that believe they're superior to other people, that's a fascist, basically. What they think is fascist is the 1% of the Nazis' uh, politics that had to do with Jews and race. Most of it really didn't have anything to do with that. And for good reason, they had a pretty ethnically homogenous culture. But how I'm is less than 10% of their culture was, not European. And to them, that's what they call fascist. So when they say Israel is a fascist state, well, what they mean is it's a racist state. They're racist. They think they have a supremacy, or they have a supremacist ideology. And it is kind of sickening. When I seen the way that these people were talking about the Arabs, they talk that way about us too. You know, we ignore this shit at our own peril. If we don't just if we're not willing to acknowledge, when these people, like when they talk about Muslims, they talk that way about us too. They just don't do it in front of us. They spit on Christians in Israel. Uh Obviously, they think we're the equivalent as the Muslims, but they think that we believe that Muslims are beneath us. Like specifically, we don't do that because our religion and our entire worldview is based on, treat others how you wish to be treated, because the way you treat others, that's how you're going to be treated when you don't have the whip hand. And we may not have the whip hand, in a few years. Who knows? But either way, it's not right. That's not the way our society operates. We're better than that. And the whole idea of winning hearts and minds is absolutely in opposition to the supreme. We don't need to talk about how good we are versus how good other people are. It's low IQ, like, honestly, because there's always a bigger fish. Somebody's always smart. No matter how smart you are, somebody's always smarter. And if not, somebody will be. Somebody will come along eventually. I think these Israelis, and I just don't see how they're going to last. And I'm starting to get to the point where I'm seriously scared of a nuclear strike, of a nuclear detonation. I mean, that this is really starting to become a real potential outcome of this war. A lot of people are asking, what the hell? Why is Iran cease? Why did they do a ceasefire? Why are they negotiating with us? We've done nothing but lie to them. We've done nothing but sneak attacks, sucker punches. That's all we've done. Why would they negotiate with us? They're negotiating with us because they know nuclear annihilation is on the table. Whether Donald Trump had said it or not, we know how belligerent and how insane Israel is. Netanyahu, they would absolutely use a nuclear weapon. And if it looks like Iran is about to get a nuclear weapon, or Israel is going to attempt to drop a nuclear weapon, whether we like it or not. Like, they honestly believe that if Iran gets a nuke, they're destroyed. And I just don't believe that. I don't believe that for a second. I don't think Iran wants trouble. Like, they have a lot to lose. Picture this. They have so much oil. If they can just figure out how to get peace, they are so rich. They have such a future, a such a they have so much potential for a great future. And if they get wiped off the face of the earth, like, they could have it so good if they just figure out how to make peace. That's what they're trying to do, and that's why they're not pushing their luck. They have a lot of leverage. They have the whip hand in this situation, but they're not pushing us. They've proven their point, but they're not driving it home. It's not like they're not really making us suffer. They could, because they know, you know, they're dealing with Israel, and Israel, they're insane. They're extremists. And they I think they would like, we've seen what they've done, the atrocities they've been willing to carry out. Does anybody believe that they wouldn't be that they would not use a nuclear weapon. I mean, I how could anybody have trust in those people? They have betrayed us at every every chance, at every corner, at every turn. They have betrayed us, and there's nothing, no evidence that there's no evidence to the contrary that they would, like, even in the 70s when they were fighting Egypt and Jordan. After the conflict was over, they asked Golda Meir if she would have used a nuclear weapon without a second's hesitation. She said yes, of course. You know, they're willing to use a nuke. And like once Israel or the US uses a nuke, it's only a matter of time before we get a nuke, before somebody nukes us. That scares me. That scares the fuck out of me. We've been so belligerent over the last 80 years that and everybody is willing to play inside the rules as long as we stay inside the rules. But if Israel drops a nuke, all we have to do is piss the right people off, and we got one coming right back at us. Like it's that scares the shit out of me. What's stopping North Korea? You know, and if we do it, if we prove like, yeah, you know, this is acceptable, we'll do this. If you piss us off enough, or if you if you blockade oil for long enough, we'll just fucking nuke your ass. I mean, oh man, it's only a matter of time before somebody says that about us or decides to nuke us, and we'll have no leg to stand on. Like that fucking scares me. And these nutcases in the Middle East, like how bad our whole country is just like, oh my God, enough of this. Like these people are not worth it. And this war has really forced a lot of people that refuse to, no, some people would just ignore this. You know, they would talk about anything else, kind of like Matt Walsh. No matter what happens in Israel or in the Middle East, Matt Walsh will find some way to focus on other stuff. I'm not scared. I'm just saying we should have prudence. Why should if we dropping a nuclear bomb, what does that say about us? That we're that bad at diplomacy? That we can't get along with other people on the planet that bad that we have to murder them? We have to kill men, women, and children? I'm not with that. I'm not ready to kill men, women, and children. I'm sorry. I'm just not. I'm not. I'm not ready to kill innocent people. It has nothing to do with being scared. Absolutely nothing to do with being scared. But prudence, that's not prudent. It makes no sense to pick fights like that. I mean, it just shows that there's a failure. We have a failure. You know, because war is politics. It's just violent politics when all other avenues fail. You kind of resort to war. If you can't solve a problem with somebody else via peaceful means, you go to war. And if you can't win at war, you drop a nuke. So that means that we would have exhausted every other avenue. Maybe, like, sounds like we just lost and we're just butthurt and wanting to bomb, murder women, innocent people. And I'm just not willing to do that. And, nobody's going to nuke us. It would be after we used a nuclear weapon. So it would be our own problem. It would be our own fault. I just think there's a lot going on in the Middle East right now. And like, it's imperative that we get this right. I think and America will get it right. We're trending in that direction. People do not like Israel, and they're Israel only has goodwill built up with one people in the whole world, one group of people. Boomer American whites, white boomer Americans. That's literally the only group on the planet that Israel has goodwill with. South Korea, China, Japan, India, half the fucking planet, India and China have a problem with Israel. So that's half the planet right there. Or no, 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 no. Israel is good with India, actually. I guess India's maybe it's India, but India and the boomers, or Modi and the boomers, and they're making people suffer. I don't think things are going good for them, and because we're so attached at the hip with them, they're not going so good for us. However, I just think our country is trending in the direction of decoupling. And like Tucker never used to talk about this. People would avoid this like the plague. Nick was like one of the only people for many years. Nick and Shank, whatever his last name is, those are like the two people that would speak out against this. But then all of a sudden, Israel starts just goes insane, and it's like they never had any intention of getting along with the people in the Middle East. I feel like their intention has always been to cleanse the Middle East ethnically. No, you won't find Zionism in China, but their goal has always been to ethnically cleanse the Middle East. They never intended to make nice with their neighbors. And where do they get off? Like, we don't have the luxury of not playing, like no other country has the luxury of not playing nice with others. We play nice with China and Russia. We have no choice. Israel, they don't have to play nicely with their neighbors though. They can just murder and kill them. And there are innocents there. A 1-year-old child is an innocent child no matter what. And like there's a reason why this war stopped too, why there was a ceasefire. Trump, one of those bridges he bombed, there were people, children and men and women standing around that bridge, basically off saying if you're going to bomb our infrastructure, you're going to kill us too. You're going to kill civilians. Even Trump winced, I'm sure, at that footage of a missile going into a base and with people around, or going into a bridge with people around it. I mean, it's pretty sinister. And he stopped, he basically, that's when the ceasefire happened. It's untenable. And we've spent the last century moralizing and saying that, we play by the rules, the international rules based order. And I'm not really for the international rules based order. I'm more or less for realpolitik, how things always have been. But we've been sermonizing and moralizing for years. And the longer this goes on, the worse it gets for us. Yeah, of course, man. That's it's my pleasure. I would be watching Nick, you know, nice. Oh yeah, absolutely. Of course. Thank you for the super chat, good sir. Ken 6863. Yeah, I mean, I would be watching it anyways, and this stuff is important to me. I'm not ranting for over an hour because this is just kind of a hobby. No, it's important to me. I wouldn't waste my breath if I didn't think that this wasn't worth my time. Like absolutely I think what Nick says is extremely important that people hear it. Oh yeah, he's an absolute sellout. And the rest of the world, they don't seem to really they're not very happy with us cuz like I said, Viktor Orban, he he got JD went to Viktor Orban right after the peace deals or whatever, and that hurt him. Like that hurt him in the polls. That he's so close to Trump and that JD came to talk to him. I need a couple drinks. Yeah, I hear that. I'm pretty my tempo, I guess you could say, or my heart rate's pretty high at the moment. But on a lighter note, I was watching Hamlet last night, and the Shakespeareisms, the different terms that are used, or all, the different they're quotes that we don't even realize quotes. Like when people say "my heart of hearts," that's from Hamlet. Like that's a Shakespearean term that Shakespeare invented. My heart of hearts. I hear that people say that so often, and I'm always hearing these, waiting in the wings. That's ulterior motives. That's another one that's a Shakespearean. Wearing my heart upon my sleeve, or wearing your heart on your sleeve. That's from Othello. There's so many, the green-eyed monster, as it were, which is envy. He's talking about envy, or making the beast with two backs. I just love that our language is just littered with these really interesting Shakespearean analogies, these Shakespearean quotes. Heart of hearts, that's one that people use quite often. And also, there's a scene at the end where the king of Denmark, Hamlet's uncle, where he's like he's talking about assassinating Hamlet, and he's going to use a nobleman who recently lost his sister and his father because of Hamlet. So his uncle is like, "Oh, I can get this guy to kill him because the guy's really good at fencing." So he sets up this duel basically with Hamlet, where they poison the sword the other guy's going to use, and he comes up with this dastardly plan. But as he's telling Laertes this plan, he starts talking about he starts looking at this a throne chair, a wooden throne chair, and he says, uh, "This wood and this should." At first, he starts talking about the wood, and he's like touching the wood, and so you think he's talking about the chair, and then he starts talking. He goes, "What would be strong and willing, and has all the courage of the world when it's time to actually do it, when it's time," because he poisoned his brother. He poured poison in his ear, and he's saying, basically he wanted to poison his brother for years, but he didn't have the balls. And he was saying it was just weird how he used wood, would. It was like a play on words, and there's a couple of them. I'm gonna look it up here in a second. But I had another one pulled up where uh just before that duel at the end where Hamlet is killed, the king sends this fop, basically gay, this guy to go ask him if Hamlet wants to duel. And it's hilarious though, because I have it pulled up here. The guy's talking about how good with the sword Laertes is. But Hamlet is like, "What are you talking about?" Like, because the guy's like, "Oh yeah, he's got, he's very good with his weapon," and he's like, "What do you call his weapon?" And the guy's like, "The rapier and dagger," and he's like, "Well, those are two of his weapons," because I mean, the guy's obviously a fop, but in Hamlet, it was kind of raunchy in a way. Okay, here's that part, and the guy starts talking about scabbards for swords. He's talking about how if he wins this duel, he'll get these carriages. He calls them carriages, and how delicate they are, and how sensitive they are to the hit for the hilt, or to the hilt. And Hamlet's like, "Wait a second, what do you call carriages?" And the guy looks down at his sword scabbard and then lifts it up like a nutsack, and he's like, "Hangers." And Hamlet's like, "Okay." Like, it's just hilarious though. But it's spoken so fast, and I think the reason why they do that and why it's difficult to hear what they're saying, because back then people had to buy tickets. You couldn't buy the movie. So, if you missed something, you had to go back to see it. You had to pay to see it again. And like back then, Arabian stallions were called Barbary horses. The king, sir. hath wagered with him 6 Barbary horses, against he, which he has imponed, as I take it, 6 French rapiers and poniards, with their assigns as girdle, hangers, and so 3 of the carriages, in faith, are very dear to fancy, very responsive to the hilt, most delicate carriages, and of very liberal conceit. What call you carriages? I knew you must be edified by the margent ere you had done. The carriages, sir, are the hangers. And he's holding up his sword. The phrase would be more germane to the matter if we could carry cannon by our sides. I would it might be hangers till then. I mean, it's just, it's that could totally happen today. Like that exchange could totally happen today. And also, you know, there's something about modern society that really kind of bothers me. Like, because homosexuality has become so acceptable in our culture, everybody has to walk on eggshells and has to clearly state this, describe what the stuff that they do. And, you don't say certain things because you don't want people to think you're gay. You know what I'm saying? You don't say, "Oh yeah, I was hanging out with my friend late at last night, blah blah blah." You know what I mean? You don't say that stuff because people will think, "Well, that sounds kind of gay." You really have to make it no, like, you can't have any impropriety, the appearance of impropriety. And that's because homosexuality has become acceptable. And now it's out in the open, and for a man not to have that on his reputation, you have to, like, be clearly, you almost have to be you almost have to have a hatred for it. Although that can people start thinking you're gay if you're homophobic. But I'm just saying, like, there was a time in our society when people didn't men did you didn't have to constantly say no homo after shit. Like, that's a real problem that we say dumb, like, people say stuff like that because they think it's incumbent upon them, or people will start whispering and shit. But it didn't used to be this way in the 50s and the 40s. It wasn't, we didn't have this out in the open gay culture. You could be close friends with a guy. Like, and whenever you see an old movie or something where you see uh a guy kiss another guy on the head, or you know what I mean? Like, people think, that's kind of gay. No, it's not. Because used to be, people weren't thinking about fucking their friends all the time. They weren't even thinking about gay people all the time. That was like out of sight, out of mind. I guess, I'm sure it happened occasionally, where somebody's gay or comes out, there's a scandal. But for the most part, people didn't talk about that. People didn't accuse men of it. People got you automatically got the benefit of the doubt. Nowadays, my God, I mean, you have to go out of your way to make sure that nobody mistakes anything you're doing for possibly and this is because this stuff has become acceptable. It's become a part of our pop culture. So now all of a sudden, men, they have to go way out of their way, like, stuff just isn't acceptable. Like, guys used to slap each other on the ass, like when they were playing basketball or football. That's like camaraderie. But because we've allowed homosexuality to become this fucking front and center, like, almost like it's a showpiece or like a centerpiece or something, it's disgusting. And it has damaged our culture. It has damaged it. I mean, men should not have to think about this shit. Like, and it has gotten in the way of camaraderie, male spaces, which don't exist anymore. I won't even get into that. But it really pisses me off. And I think about it like, it used to be people knew that there were gay men, but we didn't make it like this big chunk of what our lives with. Fuck, man. It's like you can't get away from it either. And I just it's a shame. So many good traditions and good uh, just activities and parts of our culture that have been abandoned because, they become stigmatized, and it just really sucks. I mean, hopefully, yeah, men will get beyond it, but it really sucks how all this stuff has just gotten so normalized and almost acceptable. And that whole scene I was just said from Hamlet, the whole scene was basically that was what it was about. But it was tongue in cheek. It was, it was done slick. Whereas you're an adult and kind of understand catches drift, you could easily miss it. Like he even calls the guy. He goes, "Do you know this waterfly?" I guess waterfly was a term for a dandy, back in the day. But people used to be able to be a dandy, but not a queer. People wouldn't automatically assume you were queer if you were a dandy. I mean, some guys are just more into their appearance. Now, of course, not gonna lie, sometimes jump to conclusions too. But also, I find myself thinking, you know what? Am I just jumping to modern conclusions here? Am I reading too much in to things in a modern way? Like, because I know you guys know in old movies, they couldn't be explicit about that stuff. It wasn't acceptable, and there was a code. They couldn't be explicit, so things would be left unsaid. You'd have to read between the lines. And sometimes I find myself thinking, am I reading too much into this? Like, when I watch old movies and you see so much emphasis placed on women's virtue and women waiting to sleep with a man and men waiting to sleep with a woman till they got married. And I used to not think of it as a kid, maybe as a teenager. Then as I became adult, I'm like, this is bullshit. Bullshit. These aren't virgins. These are lying. And they don't put that stuff in there for a reason. People that is wasn't a tradition for no reason. You know, and I feel like people they respond to incentives. When people are rewarded socially, when there are rewards like if you let's say you were a virgin when you got married, people would admire you and they would reward you for that. You would be rewarded for that socially. People really respond well to social incentive. They really do. Like the social incentive that got women to pursue to pursue high corporate jobs and stuff was from social incentive. The social capital that one could the social capital that women went after, there used to be a lot more associated with motherhood. So, and that's women, they became mothers. Now it's more geared towards the sisterhood anyway, will pat women on the back if they achieve high in a corporation, even though they have no kids, maybe even. They'll still get rewarded by the sisterhood. And I was rethinking this over the weekend. Like, there's a lot of movies where that's a big part of the plot, where there's a woman and a man that are madly in love and they do the right thing and resist those temptations. And the men are, honorable men. If the woman were to invite them or if if she was okay with it, they would just do the damn thing. And also there are men out there that would just force, of course, but especially years ago. But a lot men were rewarded for being gentlemen and respecting women's wishes. And I'm starting to think that, like I used to I tell my mom she was full of shit when she would say, no, I waited, I was married to your father. And I'm like, bullshit. I don't believe it. I just didn't believe it. But I'm starting to think like, actually, I kind of do believe it now. I do. I'm starting to believe it because I know, like, there were consequences. You couldn't just get an abortion under the radar and make that go away. The guy had to come make an honest woman out of you, pretty much. So a woman had a shit ton to lose. And bet your ass many of them were like, nah, we're not doing this till we're married, motherfucker. Like it's not happening, or until you at least uh we get engaged. Hang on, let me check. I don't know. He hasn't said anything yet, so sure his stuff is on his channel. Maybe not. Maybe he hasn't flipped it on yet. Oh, okay, yeah, it's not live yet. Like he hasn't even turned on the montage yet, so but he hasn't said no show tonight. Not excuse me. He hasn't said. Oh, no, he did say that. He said not doing a show tonight. I'm sick. Not sure when I'll be back, but I'll post updates in here. Damn, that's fucked up. Fucking figures. Fucking figures. Oh well. That sucks. What a punk ass. Wow. I'd seen he sent out a couple messages, but seen that they weren't he wasn't going live or he didn't say live. So that's whack though. But I think we could get back to that place too. But and I think we're trending in that direction to be honest. I think like all of the millennial feminists, especially in Gen Z, like I guess the majority of women they want to be trad wives and stuff. And I doubt that they actually want to be legitimate trad wives because I think there's probably a lot more to that than they realize. But they want to be wives and mothers. This is a good thing. You know, once they've decided that, that's the direction that women want to once women decide that's the direction that they want to go in, I think the rest will be kind of easy after that. I don't really I don't see there being a whole lot of resistance to it. I think everybody's ready to get back to the basics. That's how it feels anyway. Everybody's ready to get back to what works. Not these dead end lifestyles that don't make people happy. They don't produce happiness. They don't reproduce even, and I was saying that like last week. What good is a way of life if it doesn't reproduce itself? If you don't have a family and stuff, that's no good. Nobody thinks that that stuff is any good. Like people want to have kids. They want their name to continue. They want their values. They want to pass on their values. Nah, he doesn't live at home still. He bought his own house, from what I understand. The house that was having trouble with outside of with the police. When that lady when she came by his house, I'm pretty sure that was his own house. Pretty sure, anyway. I don't know if we'll get back to gold backed coins. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, I think we're definitely going to get away from this bond centric uh, financial institution, the bond centric stock market, and get back to industrial base or to our industrial base, get back to producing goods, items that exist, not just fugazi figments of our imagination, pieces of paper. Yeah, because that's what our economy is is based on right now, bonds. And even China and Russia, they're getting away from that. It's no good. It really is no good. And I really see a big paradigm shift here coming up. All the stuff, all these different ideologies that have more or less taken commandeered our culture, our society, they're all getting like all at once being debunked, uh, sh- shuffled off. I think it's just a matter of boomers shuffling off the mortal coil, which that is a Shakespeare uh, uh, saying too. And, I seen this thing the other day in England. Nigel Farage, he did this, an email, a way to get people to sign up their emails. He was saying, we'll pay for a whole street's power bills for the next year. All you have to do is sign up with your email and maybe your name will get drawn. And they did this thing. And then they go to present this check to the person who won. And it's a silver haired couple, boomers, in this huge brick house that they're presenting this big check to. And like, those are the richest people. It's the richest generation that has ever lived. And they're still like Nigel Farage is giving them goodies, even though they have all the everybody's waiting for the biggest generation in the last century to die because they own most of the homes. They own everything, it seems like. Like, motherfuck, when are these people gonna let go? And like all those all those politicians are on their way out. Like I know in England they're having a problem with this triple locked pensions where everybody else is struggling, but the politicians are promising to ensure that people's pensions keep up with inflation, keep up with wage growth, and it's unsustainable. Like, does anybody that's a millennial, do any of you guys think that you're going to have a pension or think that Social Security is actually going to be solvent or going to be is I've never had any illusions. I know that that shit isn't going to exist when I need to claim it. It's not going to exist. But man, these boomers, they refuse to let go of it. It's crazy. They like it just can't be overstated what a big role they've played. And what a big role they're still playing. They're like Trump. This guy, he was supposed to change, fix things. He just made it worse. He was no better than the rest of them. And he's a boomer. No, he's a boomer. Or no, maybe I think he's silent generation. But like we need some new blood in our governments like yesterday. Yeah, that's what I just said that about Nick. Not yeah, he said he was sick, which is sucks. And it's only 10:45 too. Yeah, and when I was at my grandmother's birthday party yesterday, my brother's woman, she like I couldn't believe it. I was talking about stuff I talk about here. I was talking about how the people that pay into the government aren't the ones that get the welfare benefits or the food stamps. And I was complaining about that. Like the people that pay in are we don't get any of it. We get no help. And his woman like just piped up just to like talk shit, made no rebuttal. Like started trying to use me or like trying to attack me. Well, and she's like, "Yeah, how much have you paid in?" I'm thinking, "What the fuck do I have to do with anything?" Like, what are you like? Are you shitting me? It doesn't matter how much I've paid into. These are statistics, like empirical statistics. Like it has nothing to do with me. And like she quickly fucking started like trying to backpedal. She totally did the meme, the millennial feminist meme of Oh, well, what have you contributed? Like, what have you bitch, you're Cuban. Your parents are both from fucking Cuba. You've been here for 35 years. What have you fucking paid into it? Like, my fucking family has died for this country. Bitch, you went to college free because of this country. So it's stones. Although I'm a hell of a lot more graceful than she is, more gracious. She always has something to say. And I just let it go. Like, I'm not willing to fight about it. Not really worth it. Like, I think that the way things look, it's so obvious. They will learn on their own. What's the point of fighting people? What's the point in causing rifts between me and other, or one and one's family, or one and one's friends? There's no point. It's obvious. This is the way things are trending. You know what I'm saying? And every day, more people think the way I do, and less people think the way they do or she does. So it's like, you know, time is on my side. I have no, there's really no urgency to the, like, she's trying to teach my niece Spanish. And really, I don't give a shit. I think honestly, that's a skill that is marketable. But the way she does it is so distasteful. It's like she does it to get under my skin, or my brother's skin, or my family's skin. And it's like, wow, like, how petty, how childish, how immature can you be? It just blows my mind. A lot of people are that way. I mean, and I was just kind of saying something general, like, the way things look, especially with Iran and stuff. I really don't, I'm not happy about the way, like, JD Vance, like, walks out of there, doesn't have anything to show. He's there for 21 hours and called Trump, I think, 21 times, once an hour. Like, that's kind of sorry. Like, he didn't even have, uh, he didn't even have, I forget what they call it, but he didn't even have the right to negotiate. He didn't even have the power. He wasn't empowered with the power to make decisions. He had to call Donald Trump and run it by Donald. Well, why wasn't Donald Trump there? Why didn't he go to fucking Bangladesh or Islamabad? Why would he send somebody else just for that person to have to call him 120 times? It doesn't make any sense to me. I certainly, I hope we get real soon. I mean, things aren't, I'm just tired of us being under the gun. We're the ones that keep losing out. Every day it seems like things get worse for us, especially with this Iran fucking, like, he just totally bungled this. Bungle in the jungle, the bungle in the desert, whatever you want to say. It's all bullshit. I've been, I posted a playlist, a music playlist on YouTube. I'm not sure if it shows it or not. I put it as public, but I just want to let you guys know I am starting to post that stuff. And also on Telegram, I I started a channel. I don't know if I was thinking of, start a channel more or less on Telegram or Discord. I I brought this up months ago, but I think it's probably a better time for that. Just, I kind of like posting different, just kind of throwing stuff out there. Sometimes I don't feel like doing a video, or I just find something interesting or enjoyable in the case of music. I was listening to Jethro Tull the other day, and I was just thinking, God, man, why? Like, it sucks that they're not more popular, or like, good bands. They're just, a lot of good bands, people don't know about them. Like Jethro Tull, they won the very first uh they won the first heavy metal uh award ever. I think, I forget what it was, at the Grammys. They were the first recipients of heavy metal for Locomotive Breath. Like, a piccolo is the lead singer, plays a piccolo in most of the songs. But because Locomotive Breath was a pretty badass song, pretty hard-hitting song, they actually and the people, the judges that were picking who won, they didn't even really know what heavy metal was. It was in, like, 1978 or 79, but they gave the award to Jethro Tull, and, like, Jethro Tull, they're like, "What the fuck? We don't even want this. Like, we don't want this award." They weren't heavy metal band, but such a great band. They did some amazing music. I don't know how many of you guys know about Jethro Tull, but I'm sure a lot of you guys are fans, but they're fucking fantastic band. They did that song Living in the Past, Locomotive Breath, Song from the Wood, Heavy Horses. Yeah, exact wow, man, there's a couple of you guys that always look shit up or know the answer to stuff I'm talking about, like, I love it. There's always somebody who posts the answer. Perfect there, JQ. Yeah, Heavy Metal Award at the Grammys, beating out Metallica, and the song was called Steel Mon like, that's crazy, they beat Metallica for the first heavy metal award, the first heavy metal Grammy? That's incredible. Who would have thunk it? But they're a fantastic band, and that was just, one of the and I was thinking, "Geez, I kinda get why Nick does the Spotify playlist." Like, do you guys use Spotify or, yeah, those are good songs, JQ. Also, I love Songs of the Wood, that album, such a good album. Also, Heavy Horses, like, my parents always used to play that stuff, such good music. My mom's seen him in concert too, but, what do you guys use, Spotify or, Apple Music? Because I seen Nick, he uses the Spotify playlists, and I've always enjoyed doing that, sir, just kind of, putting people on to good stuff, good movies, good music, different whatever, different stuff. Because like I said last week, I kinda do like, I intend on exposing you guys to shit that you would never wanna or that you would never or that you may never want to be exposed to, or you may never, be curious enough or interested enough to go out and find it yourself. But, some things, like, I don't know everything, I rely on taste makers and such, people that I admire or their opinions that I admire. When they say, "Check this out," I check it out, and I full well intend on this channel exposing you to shit that you would have never been exposed to otherwise. That's why I talk about Shakespeare. There's this stuff is it's not bullshit. I assure you it's not bullshit. Although Shakespeare, I hardly have to make a defense of Shakespeare. That's one of the great things of the English language is that we get to hear Shakespeare in its mother tongue. We don't have to translate it, which is an absolute blessing because some like this it's like that is the literally the marrow of the human culture. Shakespeare, like that is the fucking the highest level, highest order of art that humans have ever produced. Shakespeare is up there. It's up there with Mozart. It's up there with Greek nudes, Michelangelo sculptures. Absolutely. And we have one, and he was one of the most productive uh artists of all time. One the guy just produced tons of work. So there's loads of variability there. There's comedies, tragedies, all kinds of stuff. And the tragedies, they're so good. And this movie I was watching the other day, it was a black and white. It's called The Razor's Edge, uh, written by the author Somerset Maugham, Somerset Maugham. He wrote The Moon and the Sixpence with George Sanders, and he wrote The Razor's Edge with Tyrone Power. But it also had, I think her name was Patricia Brown, or no, Patricia something, but she was in All About Eve with Betty Davis. And there's there's a part in that movie where her husband and her daughter are killed in a car crash. And man, it literally my eyes watered, I got all choked up about it because like when they broke it to her, she's in a hospital bed and like, it just destroyed her. And I was just like, oh, and the whole half the story is about her uh in like her friends who knew her when she was an innocent woman, an innocent girl that loved poetry. They find her in like the shit or the rough district of Paris, and she's an absolute drunk. And man, I just know what that's like to be shattered like that, to have something so traumatic that it just you're in hell because like nobody wants to become a drunk, nobody wants to become an addict, and even when you are an addict, most people hate it. It's like it's and usually indicative of somebody not or having a difficulty dealing with life. And I understand what that's like. And I was like, just choked me up. I was like, oh my God. Like I couldn't even imagine what that would be like, to lose, especially back then when a husband and a wife, I mean, they really relied on each other, like really relied on each other. Like where if, you lose your husband or you lose your wife, like, and you really don't know what to do, or you can't survive hardly, you, because you lean on each other so much. And like to see how addiction or people deal with their problems. A lot of people eat their feelings or they do drugs or they become drunks. And the latter part of the movie was that's what it was about. This guy who had kind of he was looking for wisdom his whole life. Somebody sacrificed themselves in World War I to save his life in the last day and the last minute of World War I. This guy could have survived, but instead he saved the main character and sacrificed himself. So the main character felt it incumbent, like he kind of owed something to that guy. Like, well, I can't just half-ass my life, or like that guy sacrificed himself for me. So he goes to the Himalayan mountains and, talks to, uh, religious leaders there or gurus. And he comes away like kind of aloof and very like light shining from him, just a very good person and confident and loves life and doesn't fear life. And then he sees that girl or that woman who's just been destroyed by, what's happened to her in her life. And the latter half of the story is about him trying to, save her. And then another woman, because of jealousy, because she loved the guy, basically sabotaged it and got the woman to kill herself, basically. And it showed how people used to be, how people used to be selfish. And that shit was acceptable to be like a chauvinist or like to be selfish, like we didn't really that wasn't like a conscious part of society where people like recognized how selfish somebody was, like it was acceptable to be like that to a degree, men and women. Whereas nowadays, like it's just low class. You don't do shit like that, out of jealousy, sabotage somebody else's marriage. You don't do shit like that. And that was a part of the story. And this woman, yeah, she was so jealous because the guy, they had been engaged when they were younger. And he ended up going off to the Himalayas. And then she went back home after, giving his ring back, married somebody else. And then when he comes back, she starts thinking about him again and like wanting to be with him. And he ends up marrying this other woman and she fucking torpedoes the whole thing. And it was a really good story, and actually it was redone. The Razor's Edge. I think it was redone and it was done with Bill Murray. Bill Murray played the star. He played the lead part. Great story. And it was done in like the 80s, the early 80s. But we used to actually like stories that made you think. Like that's one of them. Really made you think. And I was watching The Postman Always Rings Twice with Jack Nicholson and Jessica Lange. And there's a scene in that movie. Like people used to be committed to showing what like their movies were visceral and real and they showed what people were like because there's a scene in that movie where he forces himself onto this woman, but and it's Jack Nicholson, and she definitely kind of gives him looks and stuff. And then when the husband's gone, he forces himself on her, and she gives in after there's like kind of a struggle, and she finally gives in, and that would in this day and age, just to even talk about that will get you crucified. Like, "Oh, what are you endorsing it?" No, I'm talking about it. And the fact that that was in a movie back then is wild, blows my mind. Like, I can't even believe they would never do that today. Never. Well, that happened back in the day. Certainly that happened because women, rightfully so, they were able to resist the urges. And they would, women, they can put up a good fight. I mean, it's easy for women to buffet men. But do they actually want to sleep with a guy? Sure. A lot of times, sure. And if the guy would push a little, like even women say, guys just accept no for an answer. They don't even like argue or nothing anymore. And that's what I'm saying is a lot of times, whether people want to admit it or not, women say no, hoping you'll disregard that answer. Especially, I would imagine, especially back then too, when it was important that women had their virtue and they kept on the path of the straight and narrow, as it were. That the inevitable didn't inevitably happen. But that is such a visceral part of that movie, and I really miss that. Like, fuck, man. I'm not saying it's okay, but it happened. It doesn't happen anymore though. Like I was saying earlier, shit. This fucking study in England, the children from the Children Violence and Vulnerability Study from 2024 with 10,000 teenage children that were asked questions from 13 to 17, 57% of boys who said, or they said they had been in a relationship in the past year where they experienced at least one time violence or controlling behavior. It's like that straight down the, I mean, with 41% of girls saying they had experienced violence or controlling behavior, 57% of boys. Physical and controlling behaviors, uh, with like a partner going through their phone or social media, 37% of boys versus 23% of girls. Afraid to break up, 31% of boys versus 20% of girls. Sexual coercion, 25% of boys versus 15% girls. Hit, kicked, shoved, 27% boys, 12% girls. There's a problem. This is a problem. Like this is just, we traded one chauvinist behavior, one chauvinist gender for another. Like, what the fuck? Like, this isn't progress. That is not progress. We're worse off than we were 20 years ago. Like, except we don't have any battered men shelters or we don't have any infrastructure to combat this shit. They just get away with it. Like, we are literally worse off. We've gone backwards. Except the people that are doing the bad stuff have a vagina. They have a minge rather than a set of balls. You know what? Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We're worse off. It's like, motherfuck. Luckily, though, I'm not the only one saying this. I'm not the only one talking about this stuff. And I think it's imperative people talk about this stuff. Like, societies don't change unless somebody's willing to stand up and call for change, expect change. Is that what it sounded like? No, I was just talking about the percentages with this study in England. You know, like the people experiencing violence in relationships are boys. Like statistically. Well, I'm not the hero, but look, if people don't talk about it, then it's nobody can know about it. Anyway,